There's a reason every ancient culture had protection magic, and it's not the reason you think. They weren't afraid of demons or curses, they were afraid of forgetting how powerful they actually were. Protection magic isn't about being paranoid. It's about boundaries. And boundaries are just knowing where you end and the world begins. That's it. That's the whole foundation. Every protective act in history starts with one question: what belongs here and what doesn't? Your home, your energy, your life, you get to decide. Not your family's expectations, not the emotional weather of whoever walked through your door last, not the architectural vibe of anxiety that modern life tries to install in everyone by default. You get to decide. The old practitioners didn't ward because they were scared. They warded because they understood something we've forgotten, that neutrality is a myth and your space absorbs everything unless you tell it not to. Your house isn't neutral. Your body isn't neutral. They're porous. They take in. And if you never actively say what gets to stay and what needs to leave, you end up living in a space that belongs to everyone except you. Protection magic is just the act of remembering you have edges. That you're allowed to have edges. That having edges is, in fact, the most sovereign thing you can do. Salt purifies because it preserves. Think about that for a second. It stops decay, holds things in stasis. A line of salt isn't just symbolic, it's a chemical truth made into a boundary. Nothing crosses it without your permission because salt remembers what it means to keep things out, to hold the line between what stays and what rots. You're not just sprinkling minerals. You're drawing a contract with the universe. Iron disrupts. It breaks patterns, scatters interference, clears the field so your will can take up space instead of someone else's. That's why horseshoes hang over doors. Why your grandmother might have buried railroad spikes at the property corners. Iron doesn't ask nicely. It doesn't negotiate. It just says no, sharp, final, done. You want protection? Iron makes sure nothing that shouldn't be there gets comfortable. And then there's the threshold. Doorways. Windowsills. Gates. Anywhere that marks the shift from outside to inside, profane to sacred, theirs to yours. Thresholds are where the magic lives because they're transition points, places where the rules change, where you get to decide what comes through and what stays out. That's not superstition. That's architecture becoming ritual. The frame itself holds power. Here's what a ward actually is: a declaration made physical. You're not hoping something stays out. You're not asking. You're stating a boundary, and then you're using materials that hold that statement even when you're asleep, even when you're distracted, even when you've completely forgotten about it. That's the whole point. The ward works because you built something that doesn't need you to maintain it consciously. Salt poured in a circle around your bed. A jar filled with nails and vinegar and sealed tight, buried at your threshold. A sigil carved into black candle wax and burned down to nothing. They're all doing the same thing, creating a boundary that persists. The materials remember what you told them. They hold the intention. And here's the thing nobody mentions: the strongest wards aren't the complicated ones. They're not the ones with 17 ingredients and a full moon requirement. They're the ones you do every single day. Consistent beats elaborate every single time, because magic responds to attention and repetition. A line of salt you refresh each morning becomes a wall. A candle you light with the same words every night becomes a guardian. The boundary gets stronger the more you return to it, the more you reinforce it, the more you show up and say, "This is the line, and nothing crosses it without my permission." Let's talk about banishing. And no, it's not some aggressive spiritual combat move. You're not fighting anything. You're doing something far more powerful. You're withdrawing the invitation. Think of it as energetic eviction. You're closing the door, turning off the porch light, making it abundantly clear that whatever's lingering here isn't welcome anymore. That's it. That's the whole move. Smoke does the heavy lifting. Rosemary, mugwort, bay leaf. You light them, you let them burn, and you're not just cleansing the vibes. You're rewriting the atmosphere. You're giving everything that doesn't belong here a clear, unmistakable exit. The smoke isn't decoration. It's the message, carried on air, filling every corner. This space is claimed. But here's the thing most people miss. The secret is specificity. Saying leave is weak. It's polite. It's a suggestion. But you have no place here and I revoke your presence. That has teeth. Language matters. Precision matters. Your certainty matters most. You're not asking. You're not hoping. You're declaring a boundary that's already true, and you're just making sure everything else gets the memo. Banishing isn't about fear or aggression. It's about sovereignty. It's you, standing in your space, saying, "Not here. Not anymore." And meaning it all the way down. Let's talk about binding. Because sometimes protection isn't enough. Sometimes you need to stop something in its tracks. Binding isn't cursing, it's freezing. You're not attacking. You're containing. You're halting influence, putting something on pause until it's no longer a threat. Think of it like this. You're not breaking someone's legs, you're just making sure they can't walk into your space anymore. The classic method is ice and cord. Write the name on paper. Wrap it tight with black thread or cord, wind it around and around until the paper disappears. Then freeze it solid. Stick it in the back of your freezer behind the forgotten vegetables and let it sit. You're not harming anyone. You're containing them. Making sure their energy, their influence, their chaos can't reach you or anyone else. This is the work people don't talk about because it feels too witchy, too pointed, too much like admitting that sometimes love and light aren't enough. But our ancestors knew better. They knew that protection sometimes means action. Not passive hoping. Not just warding. Sometimes you have to bind the thing that won't stop coming for you. It's not pretty. It's not Instagram friendly. But it works. And it's been working for centuries. So where do you actually start? Not with some elaborate ritual that requires 17 candles and a full moon. You start small. One threshold. One door. One jar of salt and rosemary mixed in your palm. You don't need to ward your entire life on day one. You just need to start somewhere. Pick the entrance you use most. The window that faces the street. The mirror in your hallway. One point of protection. That's it. You're not building a fortress overnight. You're learning the language. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Protection magic is maintenance, not emergency response. The best time to ward is before you need it. The best banishing is the one you do monthly whether anything feels off or not. You sweep your doorstep. You refresh your jars. You recharge your mirrors. It's not dramatic, and that's exactly why it works. Consistency builds power. Routine builds walls. And trust yourself. If something feels wrong, it probably is. You don't need permission to protect your space, your energy, your peace. That's not paranoia, that's sovereignty. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to close the door. You're allowed to salt the threshold and mean it. You're standing at your threshold with salt in one hand, intent in the other, and for the first time in maybe years, you remember that you're not defenseless. You never were. Follow Blackfire Atelier. I'll see you in the shadows.